A woman refusing to let her homeless friend and her bum boyfriend move in with her is being backed online. Using key readings, recently posted her dilemma to Reddit's True Off My Chest forum, where people can anonymously share their personal issues with the web. The 26-year-old said she and her best friend used to party together. Despite her straightening up her life and leaving the party scene behind, the two are still close. The friend and her boyfriend have recently become homeless. The pair shared an apartment with another couple, but were evicted for not paying rent. They are currently living in a hotel, but money is tight. All right, I can tell you right off the bat, when you have two people who are living with roommates, and those two people living with the roommates cannot pay the rent between the two of them, there is no way I would want to step into that fire pit. So they're living in a hotel, and of course, hotels are always more expensive than paying rent. And there are people out there, and they will say things like, how come a person who's living in a hotel just doesn't get an apartment? Why would they rather pay, $300-400 a week for a hotel when an apartment is equal or cheaper? Well, here's the problem. A lot of apartments, especially now more than ever, the apartments are requiring first month's rent, last month's rent, security deposit. And if you have a pet, there's even more money on top of that. And let's take a look at what an apartment rent really is right now. Let's just take a $2,000 a month. Oh, heck, we won't even go 2000. Let's take $1,500 a month, one bedroom apartment. This is a one bedroom. And keep in mind, I'm here in Tampa, and even finding a one bedroom apartment for 1,500 in a neighborhood you want can be a challenge. I'm going to say you're going to go closer to 17, 1,800, but I'm really bad at math, so we're going to keep it really simple. So you need to come up with first month and last month. Well, there's 3,000 right there. Plus, you may have a pet, so add on a few hundred extra for that as well, not including the cost of moving. Now, I know we like to assume that everybody can just throw the stuff in the back of their VW Volkswagen, if you were in the 70s, of course, okay, and just hightail it to the next place. It's not necessarily that easy. In my case, because of my arthritis, I am done physically moving my stuff, like forever and ever. I am done physically boxing, moving. It is too difficult. Even just to stay here for an afternoon and try to box things up, I can pay a physical price for it for a couple of days. So you are looking at people who may need to come up with, let's just say, $4,000. And again, we're just assuming this is about a $1,500 a month place. You start looking at a place that's 2,000. Well, now first and last month, you're talking 4,000 there on top of low budget moving if you can do most of it yourself. So if you have already not paid rent, you are with another person and the two of you cannot pay rent together, there is no way you're going to be able to come up with first month's, last month, security, pet, and all of that stuff. This is why when we look at people and we go, why are they paying $400 a week to stay in a motel? That's as much as an apartment. The motel doesn't require first and last months. We always have to remember that. The article goes on to say, I offered her shelter, but the dogs and the quote, bum boyfriend, however, wouldn't be welcome. She explained that the boyfriend has been unemployed for the majority of the couple's 3 to 4 year relationship, choosing to stay home and play video games. All right, I'll continue on. We will get back to that. Along with not liking the boyfriend, the writer said her apartment is very small and unable to accommodate three people and two large dogs. She also has an infant son and refuses to let the situation affect his well being. Let's look at this paragraph right here, this sentence. She explained that the boyfriend has been unemployed for the majority of their 3 to 4 year relationship and chooses to stay at home. Why would you want to bring that bum behavior, and not including the bum boyfriend, why would you want to bring that into your house? You absolutely do not want to bring that into your house. So, and this Redditor who has grown up, left the party scene, all right? She's now a responsible adult. So she's going, I'm going to bring in someone I used to, let's get real here, okay? I used to party with in college who doesn't have a job, clearly doesn't pay the rent. And since her boyfriend doesn't work, I am beginning to wonder why they possibly got evicted. The boyfriend wasn't willing to work, okay? And then they've got two large dogs. I really believe if you can afford a pet, you are not yet broke. You are broke when you can no longer afford the pet. So long, and they've got two large dogs. What does that cost to feed two large dogs? $50 a month? I don't know. I don't have dogs. $1,500 a month? Okay, probably at least you got two of them. So why would anyone who is now a responsible parent want to bring in a couple of vagrants? I would say these people probably need to get on TikTok. They become one of those TikTok beggars that we see, and I put up here on my channel. So she has an infant son. Yeah. Why? And also you have an infant son, pets. Children can have reactions and allergies to pets. And what do you think the grooming condition is of these pets? Okay. And again, yeah, she got a man, right? The bum, her, what is it? Her best friend, I guess. Okay. I guess they're obviously still good friends, but her best friend has a bum boyfriend. Ever known people where you're like, man, my friend is great, but the person they're hanging out with just doesn't want to hold a job. I've known people like that. And my rule is it's not my relationship. So if there was someone that doesn't want to hold a job, that's fine. However, it is not going to impact me. It's fine if you want to be with someone who doesn't wish to work. Power and blessings to you. But when it results in your eviction, and then you come to me and say, "Hey, I want to drag my bum boyfriend or girlfriend, okay, and two dogs along with me." No, you're not. My place, I don't allow pets in my place. If I ever have a pet in this place, it's going to be a purebred, probably what is it, Shih Tzu, okay? And that's going to be about it. I don't allow big dogs in my place. And I do have friends that do have pets. And, I just, pets in my place are not allowed unless it is my personal pet. The friend was unhappy with the writer's response, accusing her of being jealous of their relationship. Yeah, I'm jealous. I'm jealous of the non-working boyfriend you have that allowed you and him to both get evicted because apparently neither one of you wanted to Grubhub. Like I said, these are your future TikTok beggars. So her friend is accusing her of being jealous of her relationship. Yeah, okay. She said she's not leaving him and that I'm a lousy friend. I love her to death, but the jealous of her relationship comment makes me not care. I don't even care if they sleep in their car or the sidewalk. Fellow redders support her decision with the story receiving 5,500 upvotes. Okay. We are, as adults, we are responsible for ourselves. Nobody's responsible for putting a roof over my head or anything else. Yes, I have siblings. They have the roof over their own head. And I guarantee it to you, they would not be happy if I called them and said, "Hey, I'm moving in. I chose to be irresponsible. I'm moving in." These are the type of people I can pretty much tell you once they move in, they're not moving out. And you know how come I know? Because they just got kicked out of the place that they were at with other roommates. So figure, you got two people, you're already splitting the rent with someone else, and you can't keep that up. So why do you want the deadbeats on your couch? I love my sisters dearly. I do not expect that I could just call them up and say, I'm moving in. And we may sit and, it really is to some extent. Okay. It is a test because you have to look at who's moving in, how motivated are they to move out. Now, my sisters and I, without a doubt, we would help each other. We would not leave each other stranded. Just not going to happen. Okay. I would take in my sibling. I would probably have to move my studio deck into the other room. I would let them have this room, which means I only live in 840 square feet. We'd be hightailing it to the living room family. Okay. They would have this room and I would give them the space to heal, to recover, to do what they needed to do to get out. Okay. Um, that's just what I would do. Now, if I were married, you have to take into consideration when you have a partner. Okay. And then I think that needs to be a mutual consideration that this person comes in. So there are a lot of things you have to look at. And as you know, when you allow someone to move in, okay, I have always preached, don't allow them to use this don't allow them to use your address as their official address, because if they do, it gives them, it's one more notch to give them legal residency to your place, to the point where you can only evict them through a court order. Now, my sisters and I, we would not put ourselves through that. I can 99% assure that. But beyond taking the risk of immediate family, would I do it for other people? No. So with the exception of two other people, well, like three other people I know. I would do it for three other people and that's it. But they're people I've known for a very, very long time. You're talking near the 20-year mark and over. These are not just casual friends. And I don't know, their relationship may also have been that, yeah, they may have been great friends in college, but it seems like they kind of perhaps maybe separated in the way they conducted their lives. So one decided to, still be playing and having a boyfriend who chooses not to work. And the other one said, you know what, I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to become a parent. Not that you have to become a parent to be responsible. I'm not a parent. But they just seem to have led two totally different lives. Knowing someone from the past does not obligate you to help them now that it is their future. It's no obligation for that. And what I would do to turn, if you're trying to ease some guilt, help them get resources. Say, okay, so you need a place to live. You know what? I'm going to help you with resources for community resources, shelter resources, and whatnot. But when you start calling me names and start telling me, just like what she was saying up here, accusing her of being jealous of her relationship, this writer is not jealous of her friend and her bum boyfriend. 100% guaranteed to you. It's just that her loser of a friend and the bum boyfriend, they're trying to lash out the only way they know how for lack of their own responsibility and caring for their own life. So yeah, I agree with the writer. After a while, it's like sleep in your car. If you want to be with someone who sits and play games all day on the couch, then why do I care if you sleep in your car? More power to you. But I'm not sleeping in the car with you. And you're certainly not bringing your load of manure into my place. What to do if you hate your friend's partner? You think your friend is amazing, so it can be tough to see them with someone who isn't worthy of their affection. Still, should you interfere if you don't like your pal's partner? My immediate answer is no. It's not your business who your friends date. A 2016 study found that support from friends and family can make or break a romance. If a person's loved ones like their partner, then the couple is more likely to stay together. Well, and animosity can drive a wedge in the relationship. Yeah, I think that's probably true the younger you are. I think when you get older, don't care. Okay, when you're in your 20s and 30s and, family, babies, children, all that stuff, okay, there may be some family influence. Once you hit your 50s and 60s and you're remarrying, I'm sorry, I don't give a crap what anybody thinks. When you are past the family raising stage and all of that, this point in my life, I don't look for approval from people as to whether or not they like my partner. That would be insignificant. Marnie Goldman, she's a coach and author, says you can't dictate who someone dates. All you can do is be supportive and let them know you'll be there if the relationship breaks down. Actually, I disagree with that. No, I don't think you have to be supportive. That doesn't mean go out and be mean. Okay. The assumption that you're going to be supported, it's nice if you are. Okay. It's nice if you want to support, but you don't have to. But if I choose not to support, I'm also going to choose not to be mean about it either. Okay. This is my friend's significant other. Neither here nor there. Care, don't care. Sorry, not sorry. Okay. And to say you'll be there if the relationship breaks down, I don't know. It depends. There are too many variables to just sit and say, I'll be there if the relationship breaks down. I'm just saying, I think they're simplifying it a bit. In general, yes, I can be supportive, I guess. And in general, I'll be there if the relationship breaks down, I guess. There are too many factors to just make that a blanket statement, in my opinion. For the most part, yes, I'll be supportive if that's who you like. I actually have a couple friends that I'm not particularly crazy about their significant. Okay. Just, but it's their life. They're happy. It doesn't affect me. So we're good. And if their relationship breaks up, well, that's also, I'm here for that too. So I guess as long as she's talking in general terms, it's infuriating watching from the sidelines a friend who is deserving of love being treated with disrespect and cruelty. But remember, we're all human and really try to be non-judgmental. I think that's a little hard. I think that's a little hyperbolic. It's infuriating watching from the sidelines a friend who is deserving. What's infuriating about that? Why would I let who my friends are dating infuriate me? Maybe I need to let go a little. Okay, I think that's a little hyperbolic. Nevertheless, this author and coach recommends setting boundaries to protect your mental health and help your friendship to survive. Our energy and time are so precious. We can't live our life worried about others. Good Lord, does this author just sit around and sometimes these life coaches and stuff, you sit and you wonder to yourself, God, do they just come up with problems where there are none? No, I've never been infuriated because someone that I know or like, a friend of mine dated someone that I didn't particularly like. It's never infuriated me. I've never really spent my life worried about it. And you wonder why sometimes don't like therapy. Okay. Sometimes I think they look for things that aren't there. I'm getting off on that. Okay. So don't want to is it digress too far? Setting boundaries, protect your Mental health. Okay, I will tell you a boundary I did set um, with one person I know. Okay. And the boundary was really simple. Okay. Because, she's in a relationship. She likes the relationship. He doesn't work. Okay. Whatever. All right. When he does work, it's very rare. Meanwhile, I work, 10-hour days. Okay. As many of you out there probably do too. All right. Because, I do my teaching job. I do a little side hustle after that. Still at my teaching job, which is really nice. But then the big other job is YouTube. So yeah, I put in 10, 11-hour days very easily. Um, Basically, I didn't like, it's not that I don't like her significant. Okay. I just don't approve the fact that he doesn't work. And so did set some boundaries, and she respects most boundaries. And that is, I don't drive us anywhere. I'll drive her anywhere she wants to go. All right. She's my direct friend, but I'm not willing to drive her significant more than just if we're just, like a mile or so. And that's it. And the reason being is, look, I work for my car insurance. I work for my car, my gas, I work long hours. She works long hours. My friend, she's a hustler, and I love her for it. But she has a significant who don't do that. Okay? Um, and he likes to go and visit family from time to time in Texas. So it's like, okay, well, you're off visiting your family in Texas. And she and I are back here working our heinies off. And then you want to go do something, and my car is going to be the one that's used. My rule is really simple. No, it's not. I will take my car and I will take her, and he can go in his car. And we've done that a couple of times, and she understands why, and I understand why. I don't know if he does, but chances are he probably wouldn't care. I'm not a sexist person, but I am going to say I have just ever so a touch of sexism in me, and that is bringing on a guy that can't do anything but sit around the house. Now, I'm not talking bringing on someone because, I'm getting older. So, I could very well marry someone who's already done their service and they're retired and they've got their pension savings and we're all good. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you're in your working years. Okay. You've not yet retired. Now, if you're retired and you got your pension savings going on, God bless you, regardless of age. Okay. But in this particular situation, no, we young and hardy still. Yes, even with bad knees, I still got a lot of work left in me. All right. And, this particular person, this friend of mine, chooses to date someone. Like I said, he's got family in Texas, and he goes to Texas like twice a year to go visit them. And then when he's here, he doesn't even work. So I don't want to be a part of that. I choose not to. And it was sensitive in how I told her. It's like I brought her over to my place, and I'm just like, look, I love you dearly, but I'm just not so crazy about, I didn't say, I don't like your boyfriend. I didn't put it like that. All I said was, I don't feel comfortable, transporting your significant other around and accepting the liability. And that's just pretty much how I took it. Now, somebody could have said, well, what happened? She said, no. Then I would say, I'm sorry, but it's my car, my insurance, my gas. I override all of it. Just like your car, your insurance, and your gas. You would override it. I will help anyone who will help themselves. I will not help someone who will not help themselves. And when I'm working 10-hour days and then you need a ride to the restaurant or the airport, wherever it is you need to go, or we go as a group of 3 or 4, sometimes, we'll even take other people along with us, dinner out, whatever. No, I'm not taking them. Not doing it. So that's where I kind of stand on it. So do I live my life worried about others? Nope. And neither should you. No is the only thing you need to say. Reddit users believe the writer made the right call and urged her not to give in to her friend's request. I'm at the point in my life, and maybe some of you are too, you don't have to urge me. I'm confident in my decision. Okay. Ain't no urging. You don't need to urge me and go, oh God, Carrie, please don't take them in. No, I'm not taking them in. Neither should you. See, you get to an age, this is the greatest thing I think about being in my 50s. You make decisions and you have confidence. You don't need to go looking for nobody's approval. And seriously, that I think is probably one of the greatest things about being in my 50s. I didn't even have that in my 40s. Of course, in my 40s, I was busy getting dumped, but that's another story. Okay. But you get into your 50s and you're like, no, these are boundaries. I know what they are. I'm comfortable with it. Like it, don't like it. I hear your side. I hear your point, but these are my boundaries. And of course, I always make those boundaries with the thought of what is also good for my friend. I don't think of it in terms of just me. So I did think of it in terms of what was good for my friend. What's good for my friend is she knows she can call me up if she needs to go someplace. When we go out together, she can come in my car. I will take that blessed woman anywhere. I just won't take the person that she chooses to date. I'm just not going to do it. Let her in, Reddit user said, and when you come home from work, the boyfriend and the dogs will be there. Once they're in, good luck getting rid of them. They'll be content to mooch. Somebody else said, don't bring anybody into your space that has a track record of bad decisions. Let them figure it out. Someone else wrote, your priority is your infant and yourself. You don't need a large dog and a jobless man. It is really unattractive. And I admit it is sexist when, if you find out, let's say a guy's in his 30s and lives at home and a woman's in her 30s and lives at home, who do we give more negative judgment to? The guy in his 30s living at home, though we technically should not. It should be pretty much equal. I think with both situations, it depends upon why you're living at home. Some people have really elderly parents and it really helps to have a child living there. I totally get it. I support that. I think the question is are you lazy living at home? See, that to me that would be the entire thing. Are you lazy living at home? Are you in your mama's basement on TikTok begging? Or are you actually going to work all day and then you're coming home at night, you're helping out your parents? You see what I mean? We can't make a straight judgment on it, but there is something about a couple living with other roommates and that couple cannot pay their share of the rent. A Reddit user suggested the friendship had run its course. Yeah, it just may have. Someone wrote, you sometimes grow out of relationships and into new ones. You've grown out of this relationship into that of a parent. And no is the only thing you need to say. Just say no. Don't forget, starting next week on Friday, uploads are at 8 a.m. because school starts. Bye, everyone. Several student loan borrowers received word that their debts would be wiped clean in the tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, just to find out they're still on the hook for the payment. One woman named Anne, this is her story. The 46-year-old woman was told nearly $200,000 in student loan debt would be gone due to Biden's student debt forgiveness plan for public service workers. Paid her monthly payments since 2010 through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, also known as PSLF, which applies to those who make payments for 10 years. And now finally, she had her full debt cleared. Now, the original article link will be in the description box for those who want to read it straight through. Now, I know exactly how Anne feels because when my $110,000 student loan was forgiven in 2022, after I carried it for 16 years from the ages of 36, 37 respectively to about the age of 55, it literally changes your life, not just financially, but also psychologically. And everything I did within probably the first 24 hours of the student loan being forgiven, it was like, today is the first day I'm driving to work in 16 years without a student loan. Today is the first day I'm eating dinner, waking up, going to bed, taking a shower, going to the gym without a student loan. For those that are young, that think carrying a student loan will be no big deal, it's a really big deal. And if you have anyone in your life telling you, do not go to that expensive college, do not go out of state to a private school, do not take on debt that you cannot afford. Sure, go out of state into that private school if you don't have to take on debt. But if you're having to take on debt, there is a problem. And there's also an especially big problem if you're having to go into private student loans. Because by the time you hit private student loans, also known in my opinion as shark bait, okay? By the time you've hit private student loans, you've gone through everything you possibly could, possibly even including Parent Plus loans. That school is too expensive for you. That education program does not fit your budget. So I understand exactly how Anne feels after carrying her student debt for a few decades to finally have someone say, your $192,000 student loan is gone. I actually don't believe it, Anne told BI, that's Business Insider. I kept saying, I can't believe this happened. I really can't believe this is true. I was crying. I was tearful because it worked. It just felt like I did the right thing. Now believing her debt to be erased, Anne could finally start saving for retirement. I did not believe that I would ever be able to save for retirement with my student loan debt. In fact, I had calculated so well that I figured, well, my student loan was slated to be forgiven at the age of 62. Remember, this is carrying it into my late 30s into the age of 62. And I had literally calculated I would have about 5 years to save as much cash as I possibly could before I retire at 67, 68. That is a lousy feeling, all of those years, to know that you really just don't have a way to save for retirement. And you can try to save for retirement along with your really big student loan, but know they're going to furnish 15% of your retirement when you stop working. It's not fun, and I would never, ever wish on anyone to carry student loan debt for 16 years. And to carry it for 16 years and still not be able to pay it off and watch my balance grow from 85,000 to 110. I understand exactly how Ann feels. She believes that now she can save for retirement. I can now save for retirement. Ann says, I'd been ignoring my own future with the relief. I was able to put more into retirement, and I started making plans for my kids and their future schooling. Hopefully, Ann wasn't planning on getting more into debt. Then, months later, a letter from student loan servicer Mohila arrived. The news was brutal. The loan had been cleared as a mistake, and she would still need to pay the $192,000 back. I have to be honest, I don't think I really, really believed the student loan was completely gone until a few months had passed. Like, you almost kind of expect something like this to happen. In my heart of hearts, I knew it wasn't going to happen because I'd kept pretty good track of my own debt and stuff. So when the number hit and they said, yes, you've reached your 120, this was during the Biden student loan. It was the 1-year waiver that they did that allowed certain payments that had been denied to be counted and all of that. Thank you, Jesus. Okay. I totally understand Ann's feelings about thinking, she's going to start her kids' schooling and save for retirement, and all of a sudden the debt is back. I think that is, to some extent, okay, everyone who's had their loan forgiven, and it didn't even matter, you guys, if it's PSLF or not, it's still forgiven. Remember, if it's not PSLF, you're going to owe taxes on it. All right, just keep that in mind. You are going to owe taxes on it. PSLF, no taxes. So yeah, she's got that debt handed back to her. I don't even know what I would do if my 110 came back to me. Actually, I know what I would do. I would call it game over. I would make the absolute bare bone minimum payment, which of course would have the debt go up even higher. And then when I retired, I would just tell them garnish 15%. It'd be lousy, but that's what I would do. There comes a point where you just don't want to fight it anymore. And those of us that have had student loan debt for years, I should say decades, really decades, you get to the point you just don't want to fight it anymore. And we see it all the time on the TikToks. People going, you know what? I've been paying on this debt for 15, 20 years. All that happens is the bill goes up because I can't pay anything more than the absolute bare bones. And that doesn't cover the interest. It doesn't even go into the principal, of course. You know what? I'm so over it. I'm living my life. I don't care. Unfortunately, though, you need to care. And what I learned the hard way is you need to care about it sooner than later. But when I had my $85,000 student loan, at the time I was married. 2 people making over $100,000 a year could pay off an $85,000 student loan. It could actually be done. But I think part of my failure also was when I was married at the time, I didn't sit with my spouse and we did not sit down and calculate how much student loan we could pay back. It would have been close to $1,000 a month. See, we have to remember that just because you're the one going to school, have you discussed with your spouse or your future partner, okay, the person you're engaged to? Okay, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to break up no relationships or anything, okay? But have you discussed with them just how much student loan you have and what the monthly payback is going to be? I absolutely did none of that. My spouse didn't ask for it. I didn't think of doing it. Wasn't trying to hide anything. I just didn't think about it. How stupid I feel today at 58 going, geez, why didn't I think of this stuff? Oh, I was like, hey, I get to go to school and become a teacher. The end. My spouse and I never sat down and said, okay, if we take on an $85,000 student loan, because remember, it's 2 master's degrees, dumb, but we digress here, okay? If we take on $85,000 student loan, how much is this going to cost us as a couple? How much is this going to cost us every single month? And how many years will we have to take to pay it off? I didn't do any of that stuff. Talk about dumb and stupid. Okay. And that's all on me. I don't even blame my ex spouse for that. because it was on me. I should have been the one to know that. You got to talk with your significant or your to be significant. What is this debt going to cost the household budget? So she's got this handed back to her at $192,000. Quote, we recognize you currently participate. This is Mohila in the letter. We recognize you currently participate in the PSLF program. However, you have not yet achieved the 120 qualifying payments required for this loan. Your account has been corrected and updated, as explained below. We sincerely apologize for any confusion these errors may have caused. Are you kidding me? Any confusion? That's what you get when, they send you the medium shirt instead of the large shirt, or, they accidentally sent you they sent you the wrong meal on Grubhub. Okay. You're talking $192,000 and you're, we just so sincerely apologize if this caused you any confusion. You just redirected my entire life's plan. It's like is it a meteor? Okay. It's like a meteor came and crashed. It would change everything in my financial picture. Pretty much everything. I would be back to having about a $400 a month student loan bill. And then, like I said, I would just have to have it be on income based. And some people may go, well, $400 a month, that's not so bad. Remember, though, that bill just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So by the time, let's see, it was at 110 when I was respectively 55 when it was forgiven. Okay, about 3 years ago. So heck, it hasn't been that long. Okay, it's not like it's been forgiven decades ago. All right, we're only, what is it, a few months into the Trump administration. This was during Biden administration. So it's not been that long. We apologize for any confusion. The letter went on to say that Ann's loan had an incorrect end date to her employment history, which altered the number of qualifying payments she had listed. So that administrative error is what caused Ann's life to be thrown into turmoil. Ann is now unsure where she can cut down her budget to afford the $192,000 in unpaid payments. My kids were going to do summer camp. I was going to study for the bar exam, so I might have to put that off because I don't think I'll have money to pay for the course. I'm very upset. I'm not going to be able to buy a new car. My whole world has been flipped over in a matter of a week. Newsweek reached out to the Department of Education for comment, but of course they did not comment. Think of all the plans. Those of you who have had your student loans forgiven, perhaps you can throw in the comments, okay, when it was forgiven and for how much and how did you feel, okay, or nothing else, just, throw in the comments. Did you have your loan forgiven and for how much? If my student loan were to come back, it would have reversed the fact that I could pay off my Toyota Corolla. It would have reversed the fact that I now am able to put about 30% of my take-home income into retirement because I'm having to be very aggressive with that to catch up. So it's about 30% of my take-home, okay, because I live beneath my means. It would certainly kill any leisure, money that I have. I just wouldn't have any, or I would have very little. And her kids doing summer camp stuff, that's out. Now, the only thing here, she says she wants to study. She wanted to take the bar exam. I'm willing to bet that was probably part of the student loan. Ann's experience is unfortunately not unique. That being that people are told their student loan is forgiven and then it's oopsies. Many other borrowers have come forward saying Mahila or other loan servicers said their student debt was granted in error. It just doesn't make any sense. There was no notice to borrowers. I had no notice that this was a possibility. I've lived my life for 8 months debt-free. I mean, without a student loan. But I would have done things differently than I had I known. Yeah, signing up your kids for summer camp and all that. I mean, think about it. You think you're going to be living the life. You think I am free. I am done. I can finally get that car that I want, get the new bed I want. I can order the new curtains I've been looking for, and the kids can go to summer camp. She didn't have all that in there, but you get my drift. Alex Bean, a financial literacy instructor, said we're likely to see more and more mistakes like this happen as student loan forgiveness is introduced at both the state and federal level. Oh, you guys, I just really feel for her. Loan providers have software that make mistakes, and if they discover it, they'll definitely course correct to collect. Now, let me tell you something. For those of you that are still in the process, perhaps you've gotten you're in the process of getting your loans forgiven. Like you've got your 120 and you're just waiting for them to say, okay. And that may be a very long wait. Okay. Oh, and don't forget, August 1st, save borrowers. Interest starts for save August 1st. Okay. Now then, here's the thing. A lot of you may have made overpayments. So you've made your 120 plus an extra 10. And you want to write in and say, hey, give me the extra 10. Let me tell you something. If your student loans are forgiven, leave it. Don't ask for a refund of the unused of the overpayments. I'm going to tell you why. I have a big belief that you do not want to give the Department of Education a reason to re-examine your file. So you've just had, let's just throw out a number. You've just had your $75,000 student loan forgiven. You've made an extra $4,000 in payments and you want that extra back accepted as part of the loss, so to speak. You've just had $75,000. I'm playing with numbers here, okay? You've just had $75,000 forgiven and you're going to quibble over an extra four. I don't care if it's an extra 10, 15, 20,000. I'm the type that once you say forgiven and you've given me that letter, I'm gone. I'm out. That's it. Okay. I keep the extra 5, 10, 15 grand. Keep it. It's relative to what you've been forgiven. Technically, I think I made an extra 4 payments. Do you think I was going to complain about those 4 payments after you've just forgiven me for 110? I don't need to give you another reason to go into my file because you see, that's how they find errors. And they go, oh, I'm sorry. You know what? The accountant or the computer, as we know, put in the wrong date, Miss Horn. You're really not ready for forgiveness yet. Nah, I'm like, we're good. Wash my hands. I'm clean of it. You're good. I'm good. Keep the extra. Consider it a tip. Okay, that is just my suggestion. Let's not get all quibby over, well, I gave them an extra $1,300 and I want it back. I don't care if it's an extra 10 grand. If you were in a position where you had to get student loan forgiveness, let the money go. If you do receive a letter claiming all of your debt is forgiven, you might have to double check the fine print before hosting any sort of celebration. It's a good idea as a borrower to check base with your loan provider when forgiveness is issued to make sure you meet all the terms. It could only save you the burden of having to pay down the line, but the heartache that comes with it as well. Well, this is kind of worthless here, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, it says here it's a good idea as a borrower to check with your loan provider when forgiveness is issued. How are you going to check? They're the ones that wrote you the letter to begin with. If there's a mistake, it's going to be on their end, and I'm not going to know about it unless it is so blatantly obvious to me that there's a mistake. Like I know, like in my head, I'm going, I know I didn't pay that 110. They accidentally gave me credit for an extra 10 months. Okay. Unless you blatantly know that, then if you blatantly do, I would tell them that because like they said, it'll save you a headache. But in my case, I've had my loan for 16 years. It's gone through forbearance. It never was in default. Okay. But it's gone through forbearance and all of that stuff. I'm going to assume when you said I'm good, I'm going to assume after 16 years, I'm good. I also know how many years I've taught. I know how many months I've paid. Okay. But you really can't expect logically a student loan borrower, short of being able to access your student loan servicer's computer records. There's no way for me to double check that what you said was correct. Again, unless it's blatantly obvious to me that there's a mistake. But by the time a student loan gets to this PSLF or otherwise forgiveness, guys, we've been holding on to it for 15, 20 years, 25, 30 years. So I think that's almost like blaming the student loan borrower where the student loan borrower should not be blamed. No, the service provider needs to double check their freaking records. Okay, moving on. Or is that the end of it? Oh, you guys, that's the end of it. Okay, so before I close, I know some people have said things like, well, I've read it, time to time in the comments. It's almost like they want you to fail sometimes, but I've heard people write in the comments. I've seen people write in the comments, not heard. Okay. Things like, well, you never know. They could call back your PSLF. No, they're not going to call back my PSLF. And I have 0% chance of worry. First off, it was done 3 years ago and an administration ago. Second, without there being a clerical error, okay, you can't go back on a loan that's been forgiven. There needs to be a clerical error. And by the way, yes, I did look that up. You know, on this channel, I fact check stuff. You guys should know that by now. Okay. No, there has to be an administrative error. In her case, there was an administrative error and it was found 8 months after. Also, she is PSLF. I'm PSLF. And that is congressional, as you know. That cannot just be wiped out. That cannot be wiped out with an executive order no matter who's in the White House. It has to be wiped out by Congress, public service loan forgiveness specifically. So, no, and the fact also, I was in the same job for 16 years. Okay. I didn't bounce around and stuff. So I don't know how this clerical error happened to this poor lady, but it did. And hopefully it doesn't happen to any of us. Talk to you later. A woman's decision to prioritize her own family over her financially struggling brother has ignited debate on Reddit, where thousands of users weighed in on whether she was in the wrong for refusing to give her brother rent money. The post, the Redditor says, her mom shamed me for prioritizing my own family. The poster, a 28-year-old mother of two, explained that she and her 30-year-old husband are working hard to stay afloat financially while saving for the future and paying off debt. We're doing our best to stay on top of things financially, but it's hard, she wrote. We both work full time and we're saving for the future, paying off debt, and just trying to make sure our kids have everything they need. The last few years has been a struggle, but we're getting there. Let's pause for a minute. So we have a 28-year-old mother with kids. So she has multiple children, and she also has a 30-year-old husband. From the sounds of it, it seems to me that she's very responsible. She's aware of the family finances. She's aware that her duty is to her family first, most off her kids first and her husband, not her brother. That balance was disrupted when her brother, who was in his mid 20s, called asking for $4,500 to cover overdue rent. Don't worry, we're going to get back to that. He's been struggling financially for a while now because of poor spending habits, and now he's in danger of being evicted, she explained. He said his life would fall apart if I didn't help him. I told him I couldn't. We're not in a position to throw around that kind of money, especially since I have my own family to take care of. Plus, he's been asking for help like this for years, and I just don't think it's right to keep bailing him out. Her decision did not sit well with her mother, who called shortly after to criticize her refusal to help. I wonder if this is like cultural, okay? Where like in some families, and when I'm thinking cultural, I'm not thinking United States, I'm thinking more of overseas, where in some countries, I'm just wondering, okay, I'm not culturally learned in that respects, okay? But is there like a sense of duty that the daughter is supposed to help the so-called, man of the house? In this case, would be her brother. Now, her brother is in his 20s and he wants $4,500. Guys, that's an astronomical amount of money to want. In my world as a school teacher, you come to me, you say, I want $4,500. $4,500, that's a few months of earnings for me. Take home. Okay, take home pay. That can be a few months for me to give up to give you $4,500. The other thing too is he's been struggling financially. So guess what? It sounds as though she has helped him in the past. When you simply give a beggar handouts, and we all know this from the begging TikToks I've been doing, right? Don't worry, I'll attach them at the end if you missed it. Okay. I'm been very trending lately on the begging TikToks, okay, because I find them fascinating, to be totally honest. But you keep giving a beggar handouts, and after a while they go, gee, we don't have to fish for ourselves. I'll just go to the human and let the human feed me. Absolutely no way does your sibling, your 20-year-old, and sounds like bad financially learned person here, no way does he come over your husband and your kids. Absolutely no way. And she says he's been asking for help like this for years. So this means all the help the family's been giving him is doing nothing to serve him. As Dave Ramsey would say, I love you enough that I'm not going to help you stay on this financial treadmill. He may not use those words, but you get my point. In other words, the family has actually done the brother a disservice. Okay, this Redditor, the writer, she and her, possibly the other members of her family, they've done the brother a disservice by consistently helping him because as a mid 20-year-old, he should be financially sufficient. And yes, sometimes that means you have to work overtime. Sometimes it means you have to work a job and a half, whatever. But going to his sister, and he's probably jealous of his sister too, because he sees the sister and they're financially solid. They're aware of their budget. She sees, he sees the sister with the husband and probably thinks, well, there are two of you in the family. Why can't you lend me money? $4,500 is not chump change. The writer said she was told by her mother she was being selfish and that family comes first. That's interesting. Well, then what's your husband and what are your kids? She told me I could always rebuild my savings later and that I should help my brother because he's in a crisis, the woman wrote. She even said, don't you want to show your kids what family is supposed to be? That's the kind of example you should be setting. She accused me of choosing my own family over him and said I needed to grow up and be there for your brother when he needs you. Gaslighting. Don't let someone gaslight you into thinking that you are in the wrong and that you are the bad person because you're not going to put your sibling over your children. We're not even talking your spouse, although I believe that once you are married, it is you and your spouse. You guys are the foundation. Don't let anyone gaslight you and say that because you won't sacrifice for another family member who is clearly irresponsible, and that you won't sacrifice for him, that makes you're a bad daughter, you're a bad sister, you're a bad wife. And isn't it funny that the mother says, well, family comes first. Oh, mother, your children grow up, they create their own families. And after a while, you are not first in their life. Your house may not be the place they want to go to for every holiday. At some point, they may want to stay in their own house with their own family. The mother's kind of a little bit hypocritical here. Okay. The mother wants the daughter to believe that the mother's family comes first without recognizing that the daughter now has her own family and the daughter wants to instill the same values supposedly that the mother is saying about family comes first. Taking care of your deadbeat brother, not necessary, and that's not part of the game plan. The situation highlights a common family dynamic that one is often fueled by expectations, guilt, and a sense of obligation. According to Rachel, a mental health counselor. Let me tell you something. Perhaps it's just my age at this point. In my 50s, you're going to have a hard time making me feel guilty that I'm not going to support someone who's a deadbeat. That's the nice thing about being 50 and a Gen Xer on top of it. Okay. It's just, you don't care. It's like, hey, if you want to be fiscally irresponsible and you want to live your life like that, you cannot go to your siblings and say, hey, give me $4,500. That's a lot of money. So no, see, I'm the type, maybe it's my, lack of cultural upbringing. You're not going to get me to feel guilty about that. I will sleep very nicely in my luxury sheets and on my pillow top mattress. Okay. So that's why I'm kind of wondering, is this perhaps a, religion/cultural thing that's outside of the United States? But I'm going to tell anybody, I don't care what culture you are, your family does come first. And if you're still, man or woman, okay, hanging on the mommy and daddy's purse strings because you can't get together and yet you're solidly in your mid-20s. And I understand that there is still some parental support to some extent that happens with kids because, inflation and living costs are high. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who are fiscally irresponsible, like the dude in this article here, okay? Going to a family member saying, hey, bail me out again. You see, that's what I'm talking about. I see a family caught in a familiar dance, says this licensed health counselor, of expectations and guilt and the longing to be seen as good, as loving, and worthy. This young woman is at a crossroads between the old patterns of her family and the new foundation she's building with her husband and children. All right, well, it's really simple. Which comes first? The new foundation with your husband and children comes first. If your family chooses to not participate in your life because you do not live your life financially and everything else with the way they expect, then bye-bye. Again, I'm going with the assumption, okay, as in this story, that you have someone who is very irresponsible and they want someone the mother wants the daughter to bail out her irresponsible son/brother. No, see, don't let people gaslight you, especially when it comes to your money, your finances, when it comes to the relationship you have with your spouse. Okay. And the relationship with your children. Don't let anybody gaslight you and tell, oh, you're doing it all wrong because you're not willing to sacrifice. Any money that goes out the door, if you're in a relationship, okay, preferably married, but even if you're shacking up together like I've done, okay, but in other words, your finances somehow or another tied, whether it's in marriage or not, okay, you need to both be in agreement, Could you imagine her sending out $4,500 what that could do to the relationship between the husband and the wife? Basically, you're going to sacrifice your relationship to make your mother and your brother happy? Forget it. Don't do it. Scrolling. Around half of renter households in the U.S. spend over 30% of their income on rent. Well, 12.1 million households are severely cost burdened. Yeah, everybody is cost burdened. And clearly, the Redditor, the author, recognized that, and she's trying to fix it. She has a focus. True family is not built on obligation. According to the poster, her mother is now refusing to speak to her and has told other relatives that she is heartless and unsupportive. Oh, what a wicked witch that woman is. Then the question becomes, how come the mother doesn't do it? Mom, you're so big into this. Why don't you go ahead and do it? Well, I can't do it anymore. I'm getting near retirement. Oh, really? Okay. Then don't be telling me what to do, because guess what? I want to retire too. I ad-libbed all of that for anybody who's listening to it. Okay. So the mother's basically giving her a big guilt trip. Gaslighting. Don't let anybody ever gaslight you about your money. Don't ever let that happen. And guys, if you ever go on a date we're taking a little side step here, and a woman orders, 5 of the most expensive things on the menu, and or wants you to pay for all of her children she has at home, and she did not make those arrangements with you in advance, you need to walk out, pay your bill and walk out. I just had to say that. Now, my family is calling me. They're telling me she's calling around saying, my husband is fully on my side, but I feel like I'm being torn apart by the guilt from my mom and brother. Lady, Redditor, you need to get a backbone. I understand that some people are easily filled with guilt more than others. Perhaps it's because I had somewhat of a crappy childhood, not completely enough that, you're going to have a hard time guilting me into much. But I understand that there are those people that are very sensitive, and we respect that. And, just one little twang of, you're wrong. It's your responsibility. And they feel like they're just totally guilty. You don't have to feel guilty about it at all. No. And if the shoe were reversed, do you think the brother would do the same? No. The psychologist explained that family members can use shame as a means of control, particularly when longstanding financial support is suddenly withheld. Let me tell you something. That's why sometimes you have to move away from your family. Moving away from family can be one of the most uplifting, life changing things to ever happen to you. And if you're, like I said, if you're married with a relationship, it can greatly improve it. If somebody is using manipulation control to get you to try to get you guilty, to do what they want, guess what? They don't really love you. They look at you as an obligation and an expectation. So don't let that happen. Yeah. Long-standing financial support. How long does this loser of a brother want the family to take care of him? Apparently, at the sacrifice of her husband and the 2 children. I think she said she had 2 children. Her brother in distress reaches out for help. Her mother, fearing for one child, turns to another, using shame as a tool to pull her back into the role she once played. You gotta love that drama. And she, feeling the weight of it all, wonders if she is wrong for choosing herself, her husband, or children. Oh, good Lord, lady, you should not be married if you don't know the answer to that. Do not get married if you do not know whether your children and or husband are more important than your parents. Do not get married. Love my parents greatly. If I'm in a relationship, they're going to override what my parents think. As a matter of fact, what my parents think, well, it matters. It is no longer the final determination, and nor should it be. Okay. Yes. The mother, fearing for one child, turns on another. Well, screw the mother. Continuing on. The therapist offered words of reassurance. What I want this woman to know is this: you are not wrong for growing. You are not wrong for shifting the pattern. She probably has a PhD to come up with that sentence. What I want this woman to know is you are not wrong for growing. You are not wrong for shifting the pattern. I'm telling you, that's probably a $200 PhD degree right there to come up with that. Marmer, I'm being somewhat sarcastic because sometimes it's just so obvious. Can they not come up with a quote from a psychologist, a counselor, that is something we have never heard before? The counselor emphasizes that true family relationships should not be built on obligation or depletion. Again, another $200K college education thought. Yeah, we already know that. I can tell you that. Okay. And I don't have no psychology degree. I think some people are just more tenderhearted. They're just they want to make everybody happy. You got to quit wanting to make everybody happy. That's what I would tell this lovely Redditor. Stop trying to make everybody happy, and you will live a much longer and better life. Just when you're not trying to make mom and dad and everybody else happy. If the only person you're making happy are people who have no obligation to you whatsoever, okay? Your mother, does she pay any of the bills? Your brother, he clearly doesn't pay the bills. In other words, how does your daily life interact with them? It doesn't. And if the only interaction is financial and obligatory, I think that's what it's called, obligatory, okay? That's not real good. So yeah, it's not a real relationship if it's, like I said, it's based on money and guilt. Families, when they are at their best, are places of nourishment and support. Well, crap, I wish someone told my family that when I was growing up. Okay. But families also have old ways that demand sacrifice, ways that say love means giving until you are empty. She said, but that is not love. Love is not about depletion. Love is about connection, choice, and honesty. Yeah, it says here, let me just go back to this sentence here. Families also have old ways that demand sacrifice, that say give until you are empty. Well, I would like to agree with the counselor. No, we don't give until we're empty. As a matter of fact, we should give only when we are pretty full. That way we don't ever empty ourselves. I give to some, I have about 3-4 YouTube channels that I am a member of. It's like $5 a month. It's not a lot, but it does add up, like $60, to each channel at the end of the year. I think I have like 3-4 channels I do that with. That's my tithing, and that's my giving, because I really like the content that they do and stuff. But am I going to do it until I'm empty? No, that's just silly. Love is about connection, choice, and honesty. Oh my God, I feel like I've just walked into a self-help book here. Moving on. As for the next steps, the counselor suggested that the poster stand firm in her decision while still offering emotional support in a way that doesn't compromise her family's financial security. She is not responsible. I'm moving on myself, because I understand some of you are listening to this. Okay. On my side note, her brother and her mother's financial security, that's not her concern. She has a family. Her children's financial security above all else is her concern. She can stand firmly in her truth. She can say, I love you and I cannot do this. She can acknowledge her mother's fear, her brother's pain, but still hold her own boundary, because true family is not built on obligation. Yeah. Okay. Redditors rallied behind the woman's decision. Redditor users overwhelmingly side with the original poster, encouraging her to prioritize her immediate family's well-being. One Redditor wrote, you're taking care of your own family, which is your priority. You've helped your brother before, and it's unreasonable for him to keep asking for large sums of money when he's not making efforts to change his financial habits. Your mom's guilt trip is unfair, and you should not feel pressured into jeopardizing your family's well-being. It's important to set boundaries, and you made the right call by saying no. See, again, this Redditor is only like in her 20s. I would have no problem saying no. I can't afford it. Again, if somebody, if one of my siblings asked me for money and they said, give me, can you not give me, but could you lend me $4,500? I don't have $4,500. God, I wish I did. I'll give you 1,000. Okay. And as you know, I'm at the age where I don't ask for money back. Okay. What I give out, it's gone for family. Okay. I would say here's $1,000, and that's what I could give. And then they could just have it. Oh, by the way, this is my new coffee maker. Boy, I hope, is there nothing that you can look up on the freaking website that doesn't show up somewhere on another page? Yeah, that's my new coffee maker right there. It's the Breville. You can get Dillard's for $350 or Williams Sonoma for $400. I'm getting it at Williams Sonoma this afternoon, and I asked them to price match at Dillard's at $350, so they did. So that's my new coffee maker. Yay. Grinds, 6 different levels. You got to love this channel, you guys. You got to love it. Work with me. Okay, continuing on. I love you guys. Another Redditor wrote, props to you for not enabling your brother. And someone else called out the mother for enabling her son's behavior at the expense of her daughter's financial stability. But here's the cool part. It doesn't have to be at the expense of the daughter's financial stability, so long as the daughter can get a backbone. Okay. Say the word with me, backbone. Okay. No gaslighting, get a backbone. All right. Another Redditor wrote, your husband and your kids are your family. Your brother needs to get his act together, and your mother needs to back off and stop treating your brother like he's God's gift to man. Let him fail and figure himself out. Yes, absolutely. That is correct. And like I said, there might be some jealousy because he sees his sister is, doing well. Like I said, his sister has a family. The brother can't have a family because he can't figure himself out. Someone else wrote on Reddit, your brother is an adult who isn't being financially responsible. Your mom is right. Family does come first. You have children and they come first. I rest my case. Exactly. Isn't it the mother who said family comes first? Don't you want them? And didn't the mother say, don't you want your children to see how family is first? And the daughter's going, yes. So my children are first. Do not live for your siblings. Do not live for your parents. When you have a spouse, and especially when you have children, they are your new family. And isn't that the way it's supposed to be? I believe so. And I also believe it's time to go to the gym. See you later. A man selling his brother's house and evicting his family without notice is being backed online. In the Reddit forum AITA, the Redditor explains that he owns multiple rental properties. His brother was struggling financially, so he agreed to rent him one of his properties, an older house in a popular part of town. The lease agreement stated that the Redditor would rent the house at a quote break even point, and in exchange, his brother would agree to maintain the property, including the yard. However, the agreement quickly fell apart, and the brother not keeping up his end of the bargain. The siblings' relationship deteriorated, with the Redditor selling the home just to end the feud. Oh, this would make such a great Dave Ramsey call. What do we know about mixing money with family? If you cannot afford to give it away, don't try to wheel and deal. I promise, when I say to you, any money that I spend on my sisters at this point in my life, I just simply give it to them. There is no pay me back. You owe me in the future. Maybe if you can pay, it's just not there. And I think the same thing needs to go with living situations, if not more so than anything. Okay. So we already know. I mean, hands up if you already knew there was going to be a problem. So we got one brother who's clearly financially savvy enough and, worldly enough to understand money, and he has multiple rental properties, and he's got a brother who has no property. Do you see here? We have totally opposites in probably dealing with money and behavior, even though we admit they came out of the same household. Okay. So I think we kind of know where this is going. All right. So let's continue on. So remember, so the Redditor has now sold the house. They got right to this story. Okay, so the Redditor's brother has 4 children and claimed the house's hot water tank could not meet their needs. He asked the Redditor to replace the tank with a new one, but he refused to cover the cost, telling his brother that it's not his responsibility. So the brother wants a bigger water tank because remember, it's got the brother, the wife, 4 kids, right? Um, the Redditor's brother installed the water tank anyway. Are we surprised? And he used the rent money to cover the costs. Oh, delicious. I reminded him of our agreement. He said he wasn't making improvements to my property for free. Do we see the problem? And a lot of new renters don't know this. Okay. But if you are a new renter, you cannot just make changes and deduct it from the rent. Most state laws will not support that. And if you're going to get that, you're probably going to have to go to court. Unless you got that type of money. And chances are, if you're renting, you probably don't have that type of money for most renters. Not all. Okay. But I'm sure plenty. But you can't simply say, well, the carpet has a hole in it and we're going to replace it and we're taking it out of the rent. It doesn't work that way. This is why on the eviction notices that I've been doing, okay, this is why you can still be evicted from a place, even though you claim the place was a dump. There's a hole in the ceiling. There's black mold, okay? And you still get evicted with that famous, what we all know, what's the word called, a writ. And oftentimes the tenants will look surprised and go, but the place is a dump. I wasn't going to pay for this. It don't matter. If the place is a dump, you need to move. That's what you do. But the fact that this is involving family, Thanksgiving gonna be very awkward. Okay, remember this was in 2023. Hopefully they've solved this by now. I didn't want to fight, the Redditor said, so he was not allowed to make any further changes to the house without my explicit agreement. Do you think the brother's going to follow that? As a protest, his brother stopped doing any maintenance work on the house. Not long after the water tank incident, he asked the Redditor to replace the electric, but the Redditor said no. I cannot afford that since I'm not making any money on the house, he explained. Angry, his brother started to pay his rent late. The poster, or the Redditor, tried to discuss the issue with his sibling, but to no avail. Again, by the time you leave this, I want you to find a new religion. Don't do rental business with your family. Don't go into business with your family. I've told you, I worked for a family business once in my early 20s. It forever changed me. I mean, period, on ever working for a family business. I will not work for a family business, period. Just too much volatility. Okay. And like, if we look at the Ramsey show, Papa Dave is alive right now. Thank you, Jesus. Okay. And he's able to do the shows and all that. But you don't think there ain't going to be some infighting when Papa Dave goes? Please. I don't want to be there for that. Not saying that there wouldn't be, but come on, guys. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. You get to see it when it's all nice and pretty and polished. I've worked for a family business. On the front lines, they look all great, like everybody likes each other. And then behind the scenes, they're all clawing at each other. Usually with, the husband at the hierarchy and the wife is somewhat subservient. I'm talking about the family business that I work for. Not saying this is your family business, okay? But the wife was very subservient. She was there to keep the peace and make the cookies. I mean, it was just, I said never again. And their lunch breaks were too short. It was only 30 minutes. Okay. So Angry's brother started to pay his rent late. See, tit for tat. Tired of his brother's behavior, the Redditor sold the house to property developers and served his sibling an eviction notice. Amen. Sounds good to me. The brother called to ask what had just happened. The brother said that the Redditor should have offered him a chance to buy the house. I said that he was having trouble making rent. How was he going to qualify for a mortgage? Thank you, Jesus. Somebody is listening. You can't even make the rent. You complain about, a hot water heater. I told you, as the landlord, it is not the landlord's job to upgrade the place. Okay. Maintain it as you rented it. All those extra upgrades. Well, I got 5 people in my family. I need a bigger hot water heater. Well, then you go put the hot water heater in there, but you can't do it. First has to be the code, and then you can't do it and then take it off of the rent. I think it's great that the Redditor here really stood up. None of this panty Annie stuff. Okay. And one sibling is not responsible for another sibling's family. You choose to have 4 kids and all of that. That's on you. It's not for your siblings to feel like they have to support that behavior. All these photos, as you know, have nothing to do with the story. Since the fallout, the Redditor's brother has been bad mouthing him to their family. Oh, Lord. Okay. I'll attach to the end. The one I just did, I think it was just a couple days ago. All right. And it was the woman whose mother wanted her to help avoid the brother's eviction and come up with $4,500. Otherwise, the brother was going to be evicted. And she said, no, I'm going to attach that at the end. All this bad mouthing to family. What sort of family do some of you guys come from? I mean, yeah, our family has had our F-ups. Trust me, they have. Okay. But we don't sit there and we don't badmouth. I don't say, oh man, can you believe this person did that? We don't do that in our family. We just don't. So I'm really sorry and give you my condolences for those of you that come from families that do that stuff. This is when you go find adoptive families. Okay. Go rent a family. I just don't understand that behavior. And believe me, my family is anything but perfect. Okay. I feel bad for my sister-in-law and the kids, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life subsidizing his family. That is absolutely correct. It is not your job to subsidize your sibling stuff. It's just like when, those eviction stories, like I tell you, we do. Okay. And it's not the landlord's job to subsidize the person living in the house. I'm sorry you have cancer. I'm sorry your siblings died. I'm sorry you are. Guess what you find out? You got to cover yourself. And this is why it's really important not to screw family over. It's why it's really, really important to always be as generous as you can, but not take advantage. And this is taking advantage. But landlords are not contracted to subsidize the lifestyles and the predicaments of their tenants. Neither are siblings. And it's tough. Look, if there was a way for the government to have money so that landlords and other people could, help, have their mortgage and property taxes and all that stuff paid and still make their rightful profit that they've been making. Remember, being a landlord, excuse me, you don't just want to break even. You want to make a profit. I mean, who wants to be a landlord just to break even? Oh, yes, I'll take on the stress just to break even. Forget it. But until there's a way, like during COVID where they subsidize, the rent and stuff, people, you can't expect other people to cover your bills. Let's see. The Reddit followers agreed that the original poster was right. Is renting to a family member a bad idea? Yes, it is. I ad-libbed that for those who aren't looking at the screen. Is renting to a relative can seem like a good idea on paper, but as attorney Khan said, it can quickly become problematic. You don't need an attorney to tell you that renting to a family member is problematic. You really don't. But it is important that you understand the legal of renting to someone. And think of it kind of like this. And part of the reason I can't be a landlord is I just don't deal with the drama. But the reason I could not be a landlord, so to speak, or have a paid living agreement with someone, especially a family member, I don't want to deal with evicting you. Okay. In this case, the Redditor was right. The Redditor needed to evict them. The brother had decided to become a deadbeat. Abused the generosity of just basically maintain the property. The brother had it good. The prospect of having a trusted person in your property who might treat it with more care or respect than the average renter can be appealing, but the blurring of personal and professional boundaries can lead to complications. And I think we need to put in there familial boundaries as well, for family. It can be more difficult to address issues such as late payments or property damage with a loved one due to your pre-existing relationship. Like I said, ask yourself, could you take them to court and get them evicted? If your answer is no, you probably shouldn't rent to them. And that's to anybody. I don't care if it's friend, foe, family, whatever. I think here's the thing. I have the ability to take someone to court and get them evicted. I do. Don't know. I'm not a cold fish. Okay. It's just, I look at it as business. I've told you, I see being a landlord as a business. The problem is I don't want all the drama between the court date and getting you that writ. So Othniel Penn from Final Notice can come and serve you. I don't want all the drama in between. It's not that I could not in of itself take someone to court. I really just prefer not to take family members to court. So I would never rent to family. However, if you decide to go ahead and rent to family, the attorney recommends enlisting a property management service to handle aspects such as rent collection and repairs. And that's a good idea. You know why? Because they are one step removed from the relationship. Let the property management become the bad guy, not you. A formal rental agreement is a must and should outline the responsibilities and expectations of both parties. And keep in mind, while you are outlining those responsibilities and expectations, you need to also keep in mind state laws, okay? Because there are laws that could and probably will override what you say, okay? So just keep that in mind. Slap in the face. In a poll, users voted that the Redditor was in the right. One Redditor wrote, "Why should you lose money to help him out?" I agree. Another Redditor wrote, "He was taking advantage of you and you were losing money in the process." Another person wrote, "Huge slap in the face." And another one wrote, "He was a bad tenant. It doesn't matter that he's family." Oh, and another writer wrote, "Your brother learned a valuable lesson." But not only did the brother learn a valuable lesson, okay, I think the redder, the landlord, also learned a valuable lesson. Don't rent family. It's a shame his wife and kids had to learn it too, but that's what happens when you think you can push people as far as you want and face no consequences for it. Ah, yes. Ah. Happy Saturday afternoon, you guys. I'm off to the gym. A wife and primary breadwinner in her household has asked Reddit if she is wrong for threatening to make her in-laws homeless if they cannot understand what working from home means. In the post, the 38-year-old explained that her husband, age 42, is semi-retired due to an injury at work, and that recently his sister, her husband, and their two teenage daughters lost their home. "We have a rental suite in our basement that we just use as a family area. So we agreed to let them live there," she wrote. "Because I'm paranoid, I had them sign a lease," adding that she set up the lease because of horror stories I have heard about people claiming to be tenants. She explained that her husband, who is usually at home during the day, recently got the opportunity to do some consulting work, and she was working from home alone and asked her sister-in-law to watch their youngest child for the day. She then delegated the task to her 13-year-old son. Then she had her nap, she said, explaining that the 13-year-old came and disturbed her when the baby needed changing. "I waited for my husband to get home and we discussed his family. We decided together that they needed to start paying the amount on the lease, leave or start helping around the house," she said. Now, I want to stop here for just a second. I'm going to scroll back up to the top. Make sure everybody's following along here, okay? Because I know a lot of you are multitasking. Now then, we basically have the situation where, and again, out of the kindness of family members' heart, right? This woman takes in her husband's side of the family. She's taking in her in-laws, who apparently don't have a place. Now, the story does not discuss why they don't have a place. I'm assuming eviction. So I'm just assuming. I don't know. Okay. Keep in mind, this article is from 2023. Okay. Hopefully they have found housing since then. Now then, so out of the kindness of her heart, she's going to take in her husband's relatives. God bless her. Now then, she tells the sister-in-law, "Hey, my husband finally has some consulting work he can do. And apparently he needs the consulting work because he's retired. He's retired earlier than expected because of medical issues." So she tells the sister-in-law, "Hey, you know what? You please watch my child." Well, the sister-in-law doesn't do that. The sister-in-law sticks it on her child. Remember, she's got teenagers, young teenagers. The sister-in-law sticks it on her child to go watch the baby. Okay. She delegates the task to her 13-year-old and she goes and has her nap. Now, keep in mind, at this particular time, okay, the assumption is that this family that's moving in with them, okay, they're not supposed to be just moochers and deadbeats. And of course, the wife is taking in, like I said, her in-laws, trying to be the good family member. How many times have you done something nice for a family member and it's just totally backfired? I'm not talking the little stuff. I'm talking like you're letting somebody move in and just totally backfires, right? So they're basically saying, hey, you know what? Sister-in-law and brother and the two kids, not really the two kids, because that's not, they're minors. Okay. Pay up, do something. Otherwise, you're out, because they don't want deadbeats on their couch. One Reddit commented, how come they both don't have a job at the same time, especially with kids napping instead of looking for a job? Where is the unemployed husband collecting unemployment? Lots of red flags that point to lazy mooches. Nothing would infuriate me more, gotta be honest, than taking in in-laws. And while I'm busy working and raising my family, okay, I got people literally napping on the couch. And when I ask them, hey, help out a little bit, they're too busy taking a nap to be bothered. The in-laws reacted by saying the poster was wrong for tricking them into signing a lease agreement and then not collecting it so I could evict them. I said that I was basically the one supporting her, and if she couldn't help, then she had to give me money or leave. Now, this is where the story gets really interesting, and I think it brings up some really interesting legal stuff, okay? Remember, the Redditor had them sign a lease saying that they were going to pay, however much per month. They don't discuss that in the article, but a lease is signed. So the in-laws move in, and does the Redditor ever collect rent money? Nope. So the way the in-laws feel is that it was a setup. Oh, you had us sign a lease just so you could try to kick us out. Now, again, remember, no rent money was ever collected by the Redditor. And I'm not a legal person, but what happens here is kind of surprising. I think it's something we can all learn from it as a word of caution. So let's continue on. It's important to take precautions when allowing anyone to stay in your home to avoid potential legal issues. Now, my audience, we know this, okay? And we know that in a lot of city, states, okay, municipalities, you got to check your own rules. It can be as little as 30 days and someone can claim legal residence in your house. Okay. According to an article entitled Guest Freeloaders or Tenant, before agreeing to let someone stay with you for any length of time, make sure you understand the laws in your state so that you do not inadvertently allow your guest to become a tenant. It may be harder to get rid of your unwanted house guests if you have not taken these precautions and will likely require legal assistance. I would say it's not likely it will. Newsweek spoke to lawyer Mike Schmidt. He clarified, firstly, a lodger is someone who rents a room within a property where the owner also lives. Now, I'm going to repeat this again, okay, because he's going to tell you the difference between a lodger and a tenant. Again, I'm no legal expert. I'm learning this right along with you guys, okay? So a lodger is someone who lives in your place, and they typically rent a room, maybe rent a garage, a den, a basement, but you live there also, okay, where the owner also lives. On the other hand, a tenant rents an entire property from the owner without the owner being there. The key difference between a lodger and a tenant is the degree of control the owner has over the property. A lodger is generally given less control, and a tenant more likely is given more control, okay, with fewer house rules and restrictions. Now, I was a lodger in my early 20s when I lived in Salem. I worked at the Salem Statesman Journal newspaper. Okay. And I was a lodger. I did not know I was a lodger. All I knew was I rented a room from a lady's house. Clean, very nice lady. Unfortunately, I didn't get along with her well, but I was in a different mindset. But I'm sure if I met her today, she was a very nice person. I was just in a different mindset, unfortunately. So anyways, moving on with that. Okay. But I was a lodger. She basically wanted a daughter, and I wasn't in any position to be anybody's daughter because her daughter had upped and moved out of the house, and she was looking, I think, partly for a replacement daughter. And I just wanted to be a lodger somewhere and rent a room. And I don't want anybody, telling me what to do and all of that stuff. I was in my mid-20s. So that's a lodger. Secondly, a lease can provide significant protection for a property owner. A lease is a legally binding contract that sets out the terms of the rental agreement between the property owner and the tenant. Now, I think most of us know that, right? A lease can cover a range of issues, including the amount of rent to be paid, the length of the tenancy, and the obligations and responsibilities of both parties. By having a lease in place, a property owner can have a greater level of control over the tenancy and can protect themselves from potential legal issues that may arise from a tenant or lodger. Now, you have to be careful because a lot of these squatting issues, you've got people claiming, oh, here's my lease, and that ain't no legal lease. So you have to be really careful. If you are wanting to be a landlord and you want to, and you need to set up a lease, I would personally, I think if you're going to be a landlord, you need an attorney. You need something to go through legal. Don't try to do it the cheap way. Okay. Print something off on legalzoom.com. Okay. No one's actually checked it. So remember, the cheap places that you can go to get your so-called lease agreement, your tenants can go to make it look like the lease is real, even though it's not. Finally, the tactic of not collecting rent to then evict lodgers is not a lawful approach to terminating a lodger's occupancy. Let me repeat that again. That is so important. The tactic of not collecting rent, which is just what the Redditor did. She never collected rent. Okay. To then evict lodgers is not a lawful approach to terminating a lodger's occupancy. In other words, you think to yourself, just like this Redditor did, well, my in-laws are coming in. She probably never really wanted them there to begin with. I'm positive of that. And we're afraid that they're actually going to just wind up parking and mooching here. So we're going to have them sign a lease. But we, as the Redditor, we are not going to enforce the lease. How are we not going to enforce it? We're not enforcing it because we're not going to collect the rent. But I'm going to just hold the lease in my back pocket so I can throw it at them anytime I want them out. It don't work that way. Now, I didn't know that. And I'm sure some of you out there may not have known that either. In other words, you can't drop a lease and just do the parts of the lease that you want, just like your tenant cannot be given a lease and only pick the parts that they want. This really came as a surprise to me. I didn't know this stuff. All the things we learn reading Newsweek magazine online. Okay, so this is because the lodger is still entitled to occupy the property as long as they have been granted permission to do so. And they were granted, for those who are just hearing this, I'm now doing my own ad lib. They were granted permission because remember, the Redditor said, hey, we have a basement here. We normally rent out the basement, but you know what? Nobody's in it right now. Go ahead and move in. Here's the lease. I would like to have known how much they were going to pay, but really that's irrelevant to the whole conversation. It's the fact that there was a lease, there was supposed to be a payment, and the Redditor failed by not fulfilling the terms of the lease. Now, I know that may seem like, unfair, and it probably is because you're like, look, she's letting them live there for free. But remember, when it comes to legal contracts, this is what I'm learning, okay? You cannot pick and choose the parts that you're going to follow and then decide when you don't want that contract anymore. In other words, she doesn't want them living there anymore. We're just going to boot them out. It don't work that way. And in some ways, I think that's actually a good thing. I know it don't seem fair, okay? Because basically she's letting them live there for free and they still have tenant rights. Yes, they do. Because, and this is something I've learned, thank you to YouTube, all right? You cannot contract with someone to sign away their rights. And I learned this especially from when they do clauses like non-compete clauses. You work for a company and then that company says something like, and you can't work for another company within 50 miles for the next 10 years. A court can throw that out even though you signed it. Okay. Because an employer cannot force you to sign away your legal rights. That's why, just a quick side note here. If you guys are ever told, to sign a non-compete clause or whatever, okay, that says you can't do something within a certain mile radius, time period or whatnot, and you have falling out with that company, you really need to check with an attorney about whether or not that contract is actually enforceable. An employer cannot have an employee sign away their rights, no more than a landlord can tell a tenant to sign away their rights. I kind of put those two together. So the lodger is still entitled to occupy the property as long as they've been granted permission to do so. And the lease proves that they were granted permission. I know it's a difficult situation. I know, and it's not always fair. Okay, I get it. Deliberately, okay, I'm going to repeat that. Deliberately not collecting rent may be considered a breach of the lodger's legal rights and could lead to a claim of illegal eviction or harassment. As a trial lawyer, I strongly advise against this tactic as it could result in significant legal consequences for the property owner. Everything that I just said, family, everything I just said. You can, you can be the most kind-hearted landlord, and go, you know what, tenants, I know you're going through a tough phase in your life. You know what? Just sign a lease that says you live here. Here's how much you're going to pay each month. But you know what? I'm not going to collect from you. I'm going to let you have Christmas off. I'm going to, whatever time period. Okay. I'm not going to collect because I know you're going through a hard time. And the tenants go, well, great. And then before you know it, the tenants are mooching off of you. And you're like, wait a minute. I've just given these tenants, let's just make it up. I've given these tenants 6 months of free rent. I want them out. You chose as the landlord not to collect the rent. You, as a landlord, breached your own contract. Look, I am not saying I think it's fair, and I'm not saying it's right, but this is going to be one of those areas where, even though, yes, the tenants are moochers and stuff, okay, sometimes we have to look at the bigger picture versus just one little incident, okay? If we look at just this one little incident, my answer would be, yeah, kick the bums out, who cares? Who cares if you collected rent or not? You were nice, you never collected it, kick the bums out. But if we look at it from a bigger legal sense and the millions of people it could impact, I hate to say it, this is going to be where I'm going to actually have to agree with the tenants' rights. Okay. They're tenants, not squatters. Squatters' rights, I don't agree with. People who break into houses and want to live there. Oh, heck no. Throw the bums out. But in this case, the landlord chose to break their own lease. Now, just imagine if we allowed landlords to break any part of the lease that they wanted, and they could still kick lawful tenants out. See? That's where the problem is. Now, if you've been following this channel, okay, I'm not for or against landlords. Okay, I'm not. To me, being a landlord, it's no different than being a business, you're a business owner, teacher, whatever, pick a field, okay? But because of the impact, the rippling impact it would have potentially against millions, not thousands, millions of renters, okay? If we allow landlords to just pick and choose, in this case, the landlord picked great for the tenant. The landlord didn't choose to collect rent. Wonderful for the tenant. But what would happen if the landlord had said, you know what? I've decided that even though it's in the rental agreement that I'm going to, make sure all your appliances are working. You know what? I'm not going to check that anymore. I'm done with checking the appliances. Now you got a tenant going, wait a minute, we're paying you rent and you're supposed to be checking the appliances. You see? When it comes to breach of contract on either side, I'm of the belief it really doesn't matter who the breach benefited. And the reason it really doesn't matter who the breach benefited is because, again, they can affect millions and millions of people in the same type of contractual situation. We cannot allow landlords to pick and choose. Are you going to collect rent by the 3rd, as your agreement says, or are you going to collect rent by the 10th? Or are you even going to collect rent at all? We cannot allow renters to say, you know what, am I going to pay rent by the 3rd? Maybe I just won't pay rent at all. You see, there need to be repercussions to make sure the contract is enforced and in place. So as much as I think it's great that the renter helped out her in-laws, okay, I do have to agree. Please don't throw the tomatoes. If you're going to do it, make sure you leave a comment because it helps the YouTube algorithm, okay? But look, the bottom line is it doesn't matter who a breach of contract helps or hurts. It was a breach of contract. And if it can be proven that it was legally that, hey, she was supposed to collect a certain amount of rent, she chose, that's the big word, she chose not to. Now she doesn't want the contract at all, so she wants to throw the bums out. It doesn't work that way. But I would definitely make moves to get them out, okay? Users on Reddit decided the woman was not in the wrong, with one reader commenting, why was the sister-in-law not job hunting rather than napping? Okay. And I totally agree. Okay. Here I am working on my computer deck. I'm on this about 4 to 6 hours a day during the summer. And to think that I would have someone napping on my couch while I'm sitting here working, producing content. No, that ain't going to happen. So she definitely needs to throw her out. But here's the thing. Whether or not the sister was job hunting or not is irrelevant to the contractual lease. It's hard for us to look at it, and it's hard for us to want to admit that, but it really is irrelevant. If the sister wants to sit in her nap on the couch all day long, you allowed her into the house, you have a lease that says they're supposed to pay this much rent, then what the sister chooses to do with her day is actually irrelevant. Another Reddit user said, you aren't threatening. You are having healthy rules and boundaries. You are giving them an entirely reasonable choice. Pay rent, contribute another way, or have a different living situation. There's nothing wrong with that. And good for you for setting up that lease. That was an extremely smart move. Yes and no. The lease was a smart move as far as your intention was to protect yourself legally from having a moocher or a bum living at your place. But it was not a smart move in the lack of enforcing the lease. And the lease lacked enforcement through the non-payment of rent. You can sit there, we all can. We can sit there and say, they're bummy, they're scummy. How come, they're both not working and all of this? We can do that till the cows come home. But the bottom line is a lease was broken, and it was broken by the Redditor, not by the in-laws that are living there. However, other users were not on the woman's side, with one writing, yeah, but she tricked them. She didn't collect their lease payment just so she'd have cause to evict them. How deceitful. Okay, but again, okay, yeah, that was a bit, her intention was to kind of, like I said, hide the lease in the back pocket and throw it in their face when they wanted them out. But when you really get down to it, okay, this is one of those rare cases where I would have to say the tenants are correct, only in that the tenants did not break the lease. The landlord did, that being the Redditor. And if the Redditor does not like the lease, does not like the terms of it, then the Redditor should have thought twice before she allowed the in-laws to move in to begin with.